Hello and welcome to a revision session. Today we're going to look at how I can develop my conclusion so that I get an even higher grade answer. So to give you an idea, here's an example of an average conclusion, or perhaps a weak one. In conclusion, the main cause of the failure of the Republican governments was Oliver Cromwell's leadership. This was more important than regional leaders and religious tensions. Although this paragraph does give examples of what they've decided the main cause of the failure of Republican governments was, they've made it clear that they think it was Oliver Cromwell's leadership, so they've made a clear judgment. It doesn't really explain why. Additionally, although it also mentions other factors, saying that it's more important than regional leaders and religious tensions, again, it doesn't really explain why. We can make this conclusion much stronger by adding a few small changes. For example, where we've said that the main cause of the failure of Republican governments was Oliver Cromwell's leadership, we could add that the reason for this is without this is unlikely that the restoration would have occurred with such little resistance because, and you could go on to explain this briefly. Additionally, where we've stated that this was a more important reason than regional leaders and religious tensions, we could explain why by adding, although lack of support from major generals, the regional leaders, led to the failure of all of the major generals' government, etc., Cromwell's leadership had more of an impact because, and you develop your answer there. So you're explaining why this was less important than Oliver Cromwell, which makes a much stronger argument. Again, with the second region, religious tensions, again, we can develop the explanation. Religious tensions, additionally, whilst religious tensions caused, and you could list a few things like the tensions it caused because of his stringent religious policies, ultimately Cromwell's leadership had more significant impact on, etc. Then you can finish off with, therefore, the main cause of the failure of Republican governments was Oliver Cromwell's leadership. This way you fully explained, developed, justified your answer. Okay, so this one might seem like a silly one, but it's certainly worth saying. Make sure your conclusion actually answers the question you've been asked. Your conclusion ultimately should summarise what all your paragraphs have shown about the question that's been asked. So, for example, if the question was along the lines of, how far do you agree that the economy was transformed in this time period, you would need to explain what the paragraphs have shown about the question asked. So, do your paragraphs show that the economy was transformed? Perhaps they might actually have shown that whilst for some things the economy was transformed, ultimately the impact was limited for another group. Therefore, the economy was only transformed to a certain extent. So you've got the opportunity to mention that it's not the same for every single factor. If you have a different sort of question which asks you about perhaps the main cause or the most significant impact, for example, what was the main cause of political unrest in the period 1625 to 49, your paragraph should summarise what the paragraphs have shown about the question asked. So, was such and such a thing the main cause? You should mention the paragraphs in general. So, although such and such a thing and such a thing caused tensions by doing these things, the main cause was actually this, because. Make sure you say why. Perhaps this thing had a bigger impact or longer lasting effects, or had caused more significant tensions for some reason. But ultimately, make sure your conclusion answers the question, summarising what all your paragraphs have shown about the question asked. Never leave out the key factor in the question. So if a question asks specifically about a factor, so was Charles I the main cause, or was the economy transformed for peasants, you must mention that specific factor in your conclusion, even if you disagree with it being the main cause. So, with that in mind, good luck with your conclusion writing.